PechaKucha, it means chit chat in Japanese. It's a storytelling format that was created actually in Japan from an architecture firm that was trying to find a way to be able to tell stories far faster, but have rich content. And so, not having slides with tons of bullets and text. In the world, you get exactly one slide has an image on it, and you only get 20 seconds. And 20 seconds later, it automatically advances to the next slide, whether you are ready or not. And that engenders a lot of energy in the presentation. That also means that a bad speaker only goes on for 400 seconds. I was the one who's really advocating for this storytelling ritual to be part of the XPod, and because I brought it up, I have to go first. In 400 seconds, I'm going to be introducing you to 3 tools that you should have on your radar, 2 books, 1 article, and probably a partridge in a pear tree. So with that, here is my 400-second take on this topic. This is what Tablexi looked like 10 years ago, pretty much to the day. We were designing our brand new office and really thinking about how the shape of the office could really affect the shape of the company culture. Thinking about what we could do with this really big real estate. It was a big open plan, and we could design it any way we wanted. Our office looked a lot like this, where we had rows and rows of desks. And in consulting specifically, we find that there is a predisposition towards knowledge silos, that people are 6 feet away, but a world apart. Different code base, different client, different tech stack. And so even though you're all in the same company, you can feel very separated. And we knew that. So when we thought about what kind of a space do we want, we came up with this experiment of having a restaurant service inside of our office and dedicated a big chunk of the real estate towards food. We had all the commercial ovens and ductwork of a commercial grade kitchen. We hired a full-time chef, and we would eat every day. The whole office smelled wonderful, especially on bacon days, and then client would come in and spend time with us. We allowed us to do events. We could do dinners where we'd have an event and we'd have dinners and people would come join us. We could do wine pairings and discuss where the food came from. More importantly though, people step away from their desk. They'd get a break from coding to be able to connect and talk about what they were working on, how they could help each other. It became a really backbone of our company culture. And that totally went away when COVID happened. You didn't have the opportunity to have the chance to break bread together. You couldn't step away from your keyboard. You were living at home and now working at home at the same time. We really had to start rethinking about how do we start connecting when we don't have the thing we've been doing for the last 10 years. And now that we start thinking about space, we've been doing some research. So this is the article I wanted to share from HBR, if you haven't read it already, talking about how you can think about both being constrained in time and space and the impacts that can have. We went from being in that lower left, mostly all together in the office, to occasionally letting people work from home, to being full on in the upper right quadrant almost instantly, being not constrained by time or space. The article recommends looking at this through a number of different lenses. So the first is thinking about various different jobs. Some work rather well. In this case, deep knowledge work, like writing code, works really well in an unconstrained by time or space. You can write it pretty much anywhere and work asynchronously. That works rather well. But what we found is that some things really do not work so well, like conflict resolution. It is very hard when you're butting heads to give someone feedback via Slack or to unpack some very difficult conversations over Zoom. It's just not as easy or not as effective as building that in-person relationship. And I think this is one that I've personally been really struggling with. There are some things that we worked better than I would have thought possible, like project management, issue escalation, risk management. This is constrained by time, but not location. So you all agree to meet at 2 o'clock, but you can dial in from anywhere. And you use tools like Zoom and Slack to unpack stuff and talk through issues and risks. And you can actually do this kind of coordination rather well. Where I think, personally, the jury's still out is on innovation work. We use tools like Miro and Mural, and we actually made it work rather well. But man, that desire to be back in person and have the opportunity to brainstorm in front of a whiteboard is very, very strong. And so there's trade-offs, there's benefits. The flexibility and the energy you can get from working from home, as well as the isolation of being on your own. I think there's things we have to consider. And what we're finding is that the second thing the article mentions is that you have to take this personal preferences into account. Those who have short commutes and have a desire to go back in the office will, and those who have long commutes and maybe don't have distractions at home will stay at home. And I think no matter what you do, if you have a mix of people going in and out, you never want to see this ever again. This image should strike fear in the heart of everyone. It's so awful where you can't see what's going on. There's like one person in a meeting room you can barely see, and everyone else is trying to get a sense like, can you hear me with the microphone? So what I would recommend as an alternative to this is to look into a tool called Around as a Zoom-based alternative. This is tool number 1 I want to introduce. It does really good work with sound normalization, and it can be used for walking meetings. That's much more effective. The other tool I want to introduce to you is Notion. We learned about this from a company that was fully distributed. Before we went to hybrid, we had stuff everywhere. We had stuff in GitHub and file folders and Dropbox, and we rolled out this knowledge management solution to get everyone into a single place and finally try to solve the library problem of Tablexi. One of the main things the article references is this idea of being very vigilant around how you're making decisions in this moment, focusing on inclusion and fairness to make sure everyone has an equitable access to information after the fact. We are creating a hybrid working group intentionally made of people who are both going to be in the office and then who are going to stay distributed to make sure we can hear from everyone to guide some of our decision making going forward. And I found that while doing this, the way you listen is different now. In the past, I would just walk into the kitchen and ask questions, but now I can't do that. And early on, I would do things like send a survey. But when I send a survey, I'm the only one that gets to see everyone's answers. And that's a lot of bias. I can put my own emphasis around what's the most important thing. So today I want to introduce you to a new tool that allows you to do surveys way differently. It's called a thought exchange. You start by answering a question, and after you do that, you see anonymously everyone else's answers, and you can vote and say, I didn't think about that. That's a really good idea, or that doesn't pertain to me at all. And by doing the voting, you get kind of wisdom from the crowds. This is what it looked like when we said, what should we be talking about next month at a company meeting? And if you look, office space by far number one, mental health and burnout second to the bottom. No one, only 2 brave souls mentioned that. To be like, hey, I'm really going through some things right now. I really wish we could talk about anxiety. But when we change the axis and say, don't show me the most frequently mentioned, show me the highest voted, office space went near the bottom. And mental health and burnout was second from the top. In fact, the highest voted item was around mental health and burnout. And I think if you were to think about a survey, you would assume the most frequently mentioned is the most important. In this case, it wasn't. The most important was a totally different topic, and allowed us to really unpack what is the thing we really need to spend our time talking about. As we think about fairness and inclusion, you spend a lot of time thinking about the rituals you can adopt as a community to be able to bring people together. And so these are the 2 books I wanted to mention. One focuses on rituals at work, one focuses on rituals for virtual team meetings, but it helps you think about the patterns and practices you can adopt to make those connections that bind. In our case, we are giving up that kitchen experience and the ovens and the amazing bacon smell and everything else to pivot towards a different kind of experiment. For 1 year, we're going to go into a hybrid working environment, a co-working environment, where we have lots of different room breakouts, way more options than we ever would have had at our old space, to try this for a 1-year journey and see if that can be a better fit for us. Today I get to introduce Megan, who has been thinking about this quite a lot, both in her own business and been guiding and advising others as they think about how do you make this decision? One way or the other, this decision you'll have will have a big impact and consequence on your culture and on your business. She thinks quite a lot about the employee experience and will be talking to us about what a unconsultant is in her world. Her business provides strategy and transformation services for her clients, and I'm very excited that she could be here today to talk through what she's doing in her company, but also how she's advising others. So Megan, thanks for jumping in and being part of this experiment.